Okay, namaste and welcome to this joint webinar entitled COVID-19 and EU-South Asia Relations by Asian Institute of Diplomacy and International Office, Aidia, which is a foreign policy-based think tank in Kathmandu, and also South Asia Democratic Forum, SADF, which is a Brussels-based think tank with its primary focus on various facets of EU-South Asia relationship. So let me briefly introduce our distinguished panel of experts. We have Ambassador Jan de Boot, who is a former ambassador of Belgium to India, with simultaneous affiliations to Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives. He also served as a director of European Affairs at Belgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Similarly, we have Dr. Sri Radha Datta. She is the center head and senior fellow of Neighborhood Studies at Vivekananda International Foundation's New Delhi, India. And also the former director at Maulana Abul Kalam Azad Institute of Asian Studies, Kolkata. She's also the author of many books and over 100 articles, journals. So we have Ambassador Mohan Krishna Shrestha, who is the former ambassador of Nepal to France and permanent delegate to UNESCO. Ambassador Shrestha is also the author of a book titled 3 Decades in Diplomacy. And finally, from South Asia Democratic Forum, one of the hosts of this webinar, we have Executive Director Mr. Paulo Casaca, who is also the former member of the European Parliament. So we know that in order to combat this global pandemic, we need to have like intense global coordinations. Though geographically, EU and SAARC are not directly connected, regions are cooperating in various fronts. For instance, the EU is South Asia's largest partner, trading partner, I mean, and also the major development and aid partners. Correspondingly, that we know EU is also the observers of the SAARC. So basically, we are trying to analyze through this webinar that how like EU and SAARC is responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, and how this both region, should collaborate during and after this pandemic. And moreover, our experts will also analyze the trade, economic development cooperation between EU and SAARC. Similarly, the post-COVID-19 scenario, and maybe like we need to also let me talk about the regional economic integrations, especially after the Brexit, and then what is the impact it is going to make. And in South Asia, we know that the SAARC process is stalled for a long time. So without further ado, I would like to request each of our distinguished panelists to make the opening interventions in about 10 to 12 minutes, and then we'll take some questions from attendees. And finally, 2 to 3 minute closing remarks from each panelist again. So I think we can make one intervention from you and one from South Asia. So may I start with Ambassador Jan, sir?
Okay.
So sorry, yeah. Floor is yours, sir. Ambassador Jan, sorry.
Yep. Okay. Good morning and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to share some ideas on how together we can try to come out of this crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic is, however, not over, and the second wave is still a possibility. So it is maybe a bit premature to make a full analysis of what happened and the lessons learned, but we can already share some observations. And I will touch upon 6 elements. First, in the EU, the virus was, of course, unknown, and that led initially to national reactions. There was then, secondly, a rapid return to cooperation between the EU member states. From the intergovernmental part between governments, we then moved on to an approach by the EU Commission, so the communitarian approach, and focusing and stressing the need to have a multilateral approach, not one, each one for itself. Then we have the question of the EU response to economic and social consequences of COVID-19, the extraordinary measures which are in view of the extraordinary situation necessary, and in particular, the next generation EU, which is a new instrument. And then lastly, the EU external action in light of COVID-19, and in particular, the EU-South Asia relations. So, as I said, the first point is the initial national reactions. The first major outbreak was in the industrial and densely populated northern part of Italy. And that created some kind of panic, to say it bluntly, in the rest of Europe. In the globalized and interconnected world, the virus spread very swiftly through Europe. Even if China made the DNA of the virus rapidly available, the highly contagious and potentially deadly virus, we still had no specific treatment, and there was no vaccination and no prospect of a vaccination. That was one challenge. A second challenge was the fact that within the European Union, the health policy remains an exclusive national competence, and it is not within the European Union treaties. So the measures taken to protect the citizens and to mitigate the outbreak were thus, to a very large extent, also national. And since there were huge differences in timing and in intensity of the outbreak, and thus also important differences in national reactions, this led to a patchwork of different measures within states and between the member states of the European Union. And I add that nationalist policies and Brexit have in the beginning even reinforced this kind of behavior. Some national health systems were seriously at risk of collapse, of breakdown. First point, national reactions. Secondly, very rapidly, cooperation between European countries was re-established. In the scientific field, there was the work of the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, that's a European Union body based in Stockholm. And already in March, under the chairmanship of the President of the Commission herself, Mrs. von der Leyen, there was a committee created, of a European team rather, of scientists, of experts, to come up with coordinated measures that all of Europe could follow. And in the humanitarian field, neighboring countries took in intensive care patients from another country, and joint repatriation flights were organized. So there we were already in the intergovernmental level. Then we move on to the communitarian field. So the beginning were national reactions. It was clear that this global pandemic needs a global reaction. And 2 days ago, Commissioner Urpilainen stated the answers to the shared challenges will come from international cooperation, multilateralism, and partnerships. And already in March, the European Commission stepped in to stop. This is not COVID-19 starting. Already in March, the European Commission stepped in to stop the competition between EU member states in procuring protecting medical equipment. And in view of the scarcity and the competition on the global markets, the first ever European stockpile of medical equipment, such as ventilators, masks, and lab supplies, was created. And the Commission finances 90% of this stockpile. On a global level, multilateral policy was applied together with the United Nations. On the 4th of May, a global coronavirus response pledge was started to reach sufficient pledges for universal access to affordable coronavirus vaccine. At this stage, the pledges are almost 10 billion euro, so that is well beyond the target of 7.5 billion. And I checked yesterday the participation of member states from South Asia. There is, as far as I could see yesterday, just one member state who is participating. Fourth, the economic and social fallout of the COVID-19 crisis will be painful and will be felt over a long time. And it is estimated that in the second quarter of 2020, EU GDP will drop by 15%. And the overall drop for the year 2020 may be up to 7%, if there is no second wave coming. If there is a second wave, then the estimate is somewhere around a drop of 16%. These are unprecedented magnitudes, dear friends, and they called us for extraordinary and unprecedented measures. At the same time, the European Union is working on its EU multi-annual financial framework for the time frame 21 to 27. It's always a framework of 7 years. And that was already under preparation and negotiation before the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis. And obviously, this will now be influenced by the reaction to the crisis. An agreement is sought there for 1,100 billion euro framework for the coming 7 years, that is. And this will be one of the financial resources to implement the Green Deal, which is supporting the transition of the EU to a fair and prosperous society that responds to the challenges posed by climate change and environmental degradation. So the quality of life of current and future generations will be improved, and it will also eliminate one of the underlying reasons of the more frequent virus outbreaks. So this is really an important element, the Green Deal, in the long term. But of course, in the long term, as we all know, what happens in the long term. So extraordinary measures are taken at many levels. There is the support to mitigate unemployment risks in an emergency. Together, the Commission and the European Investment Bank, a new instrument for temporary reinforcement, the Next Generation EU. It is still a proposal, there are still discussions going on for an amount of 750 billion euros, 500 in grants and 250 in loans. These are mind-boggling figures, of course. What does that mean for the international cooperation? In the MFF, the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, an amount of 132 billion euros is foreseen for external action. And for the Neighborhood, Development and International Cooperation Initiative and the Humanitarian Aid Instrument, an amount of 86 billion euros is foreseen. Now the question is, of course, how much will be earmarked for the cooperation with South Asia countries and how much for EU-SAARC cooperation. Development cooperation between the EU and the countries of South Asia covers financial and technical aid as well as economic cooperation. And the priorities there are regional stability, poverty alleviation, human rights, sustainable development, good governance, and labor rights. And in the EU-SAARC cooperation, we seek to promote the harmonization of standards and the facilitation of trade, and to raise awareness of the benefits of regional cooperation. It seems obvious to me that health policy will be added to these priorities, both in the cooperation level with the states and in the EU-SAARC cooperation. But that is, of course, an issue that SAARC member states have first to agree upon. If you allow me one bit of advice, the more united South Asian countries and SAARC negotiators start the next round of negotiations on the cooperation with the EU, the better the result will be. So as we all know, crises are also opportunities, and COVID-19 may be an incentive to increase the SAARC cooperation, as we are already doing within the EU. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Jan, for your valuable remarks. I think you also rightly pointed out how we can turn this crisis into opportunity in order to strengthen the regional economic integrations, and that is really valuable solutions, I guess. And now I'd like to request Ambassador Mohan Krishna Srestha sir to make his remarks. I request my colleague at Aidia to unmute him. Yeah.
Okay, Shyamji.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Shyamji. First of all, this is the first time I'm speaking on webinar, and using this opportunity, I'd like to thank Aidia and SADF for hosting this important seminar through web. And I send greetings to all panelists and our attendees also. Actually, now, what I feel that we are in lockdown since 71 days, but this COVID-19 pandemic has not only locked down us, but knocked down to the world, Everything is in devastation. There is no contact between the people and the countries. Everything is lost. We cannot see our people. We are afraid to see the people. What type of problem is here in the world now? In my lifetime, I have never experienced like this. And what shall we do? We have no other ways but to combat. So I would like to use 3 words. Now, on the shoulders of all the people around the world, there are 3 things to do. And the governments, of course, to combat, to conquer the COVID-19, and to recover from it. These are the 3 main things we have to do by all the countries unilaterally and concertedly, So what everybody know what is COVID-19 coronavirus now. Everybody in a way are under suffering. Everybody know, I don't need to go all the details, this and that. Just now before coming to webinar, I checked the figures. A total of 6.5 million people have been affected, and around 388,000 people have died. So let's think about the social and financial cost of these enormous volume of deaths, Really, a few weeks ago, when I saw some pictures of Italy, I could not see that pictures, people dying in a lack of oxygen and cannot breathe, What a devastation is this. So this is a global pandemic, and each and every country, each and everybody in all the countries must join hands to combat this terrible pandemic. And all the details everybody know, I don't need to go in details. But at the same time, I really want to know something. Why this terrible or very important dangerous questions are arising. Maybe everybody know that even after such a devastation, we are not yet sure what is the real origin of this pandemic, COVID-19. As people are saying, scientists are saying, it has come from the bats, but some other countries are saying they are manufactured in the labs. And startingly, there are two things I really want to mention here for attention of all the attendees and panelists. Professor Nobel laureate Luc Montagnier of France and Professor Tasuku Honjo of Japan, both Nobel laureates, they have said this is not a natural phenomenon. And as you know, America is demanding for an independent investigation. China is also charging that the virus has come from America. So this type of things really very dangerous, I think. At one side, we have to combat this terrible problem, but even the serious questions are arising to its origin, you know. And if you see some Indian TV broadcast, as if there is a full sort of preparations are going on for the total nuclear war, you know. This is a very dangerous situation, and I think all the leaders of the world must take note of this thing, and we must finalize when the serious questions arise. We must find ways to tackle these serious questions.
Yeah.
And
Mohan, sir, that's really like a crucial point. But you can also like focus on a little bit about like South Asia.
no, I'm coming on that. I'm coming
Okay,
on
sure,
that.
sure.
No, I'm coming on that. Just few lines, you know. As this, you have asked me to speak about the pandemic also. Now, then I'll come to EU and SARC region. Okay, so that is few points which I really want to put my ideas. And on the European Union and SARC relations, I checked with the website, and I think EU has a great interest on the activity of SARC. SARC was established in 1985. 35 years has already gone. But very unfortunately, SARC should have been developed into a very viable and vibrant organization. But because of the lack of trust between biggest member countries, it is going in a very silly way. Even the summit has not taken place since last 4 years, you know. But nevertheless, I think EU has signed an agreement in 1996, and 1990 also they have signed another agreement for the regional integration and trade facilitation. That is very good. And because of their continuing interest on SARC, EU has become a member observer status also. That is also very good. As Professor John has just mentioned that EU has very huge amount of money for cooperation to the development activities. So SARC can really benefit from EU's kind cooperation. But the thing is that problem lies in our own side, not outside, what I understand. And we have to settle down such bilateral problems amicably between our SARC member countries, and then only we can fully use our potentials. And on the bilateral level, I don't have figures about how much EU has given assistance to SARC member countries to combat this COVID-19. But some time ago, there was news that EU has given 9 billion rupees to our government to combat COVID-19. That is a huge amount in terms of our economy, and we must thank EU for this kind of assistance. And among the SARC countries also, Indian Prime Minister some time ago has announced a mutual fund and donated $10 million among the SARC countries to fight this pandemic. And our government has also donated about 10 million rupees or something like that. I hope other member countries also have contributed. some amounts. This is really good effort of the SARC member countries to combat with this pandemic. But again, there are news that they have collected the money, but they are not. They don't know how to use it. They have not made any operational manual or action plan. Also, that is very bad. When COVID is killing thousands of people every day, but we are confused here how to combat it. This is very bad. And SARC as a organization, it has a great potential for economic development and regional integration efforts. But very sad fact is that SARC has not grown to its full potential. The lackadaisical attitude of member countries has really taken toll on SARC. And in several other forums also, when there was a chance, I have asked the presenters from India, professors, ambassadors, there must be dialogue between India and Pakistan to make SARC alive. If you don't want to talk with somebody, you cannot change their neighbor also, you see. Dialogue is essential to solve any problem. Dialogue can solve any problem, Dialogue on good faith. And they say this and that, terrorist activities, this and that, Yeah. So regarding this EU and SARC relations, well, Nepal's economy is not that big, but there is good trade prospect for Nepal also, as EU has given duty-free access to the goods producers of SARC member countries. This is really big occasion, good opportunity for us, SARC member countries. But we must be able by ourselves. All the countries must produce good quality goods to penetrate the EU countries. There are 27 EU member countries. It's a huge market, sophisticated market, and high value markets. When I served in France, I knew the potential of France for Nepal. But always, as I said in the beginning, problem lies within ourselves, not in other countries or other regions. Because the politics everywhere, and politics has taken a big toll in every part of the world, in our country also. So economy is only come second, third, fourth position. Politics is everywhere. How can we survive? We cannot develop only by politics. Political parties, political leaders should play their roles. But economics should go on the private hands, private parties. So I see in coming days, SARC member countries have a very good opportunity, not only in health activities like now to combat the pandemic, but also in many other sectors, and the bilateral level and the multilateral at the SARC EU countries. So this is some stray ideas. Actually, I'm not expert on SARC, neither SARC nor EU, but anyhow, whatever I have idea, I have shared with you. But SARC is in a very vibrant region. We have a lot of natural resources, people resources. This is a very vibrant region. If someday we are blessed by the big, good leadership, effective leadership, and our member countries could join hands for development, it will bring a tremendous opportunity for us to better relations with the EU and other parts of the world. So with these few words, I say thank you to the organizers once again. Bye.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Forwarding your perspective from the practical experiences is really helpful to understand the issue. Now, I'd like to request Dr. Sriradha Madam, because as being a host, maybe Paulo sir can put the remarks at last. Paulo sir, is that fine? Can I go with Dr. Sriradha Madam? Yeah. Now I'd like to request Sriradha Madam to make a presentation.
Thank you, Sham, for this opportunity. My warm greetings to all of you from a very hot Delhi. I just wanted to add that I have a very weak Wi-Fi for some odd reason today, so the video goes off. Please excuse me, but I'm certainly here, and I'll try and share some of my thoughts on this particular aspect, which I think is certainly very important, and I just flag the main issues. I think firstly I would like to thank also Ambassador Jan for sharing the status in EU and the kind of measures that was undertaken and the kind of funds that they have. I think it's really in a stage where right now in South Asia or India we are hardly able to actually even understand how deep the impact of COVID will be. We've just heard Ambassador Shrestha talk about the public health issues, the human losses that we've had, but even that, of course, is there, and I think that's something that all of us, and in India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan is struggling with it even today. There are huge spikes going on, and it's not a situation which is under control or something that we can be assured about. But at the other level, I think the economic situation in the region, especially for India, has been very, very deeply affected. And I would like to, discuss that a bit because we really don't see how it's going to be unfolding. It's really too early to predict. And I think it's going to take years for us to settle down and come to status quo kind of a position. But at the same time, I think my main broad ideas about here is like, let's try and understand what South Asia actually was just 3 months ago, perhaps. South Asia had two of the fastest growing states in the region, which is Bangladesh and India, and Nepal was one of the, again, the fastest growing region in the state. And they're not only characterized by huge economic growth rates, but also large emerging market. And this is one of the basic underlying premise that I actually argue from where I'm saying that South Asia has a demographic dividend, which is very, very difficult to overlook. And in fact, if you see also in a very unfortunate way, the kind of pandemic fatalities that has occurred in South Asia, we say that demographic dividend has actually paid us off to a certain extent. But even that apart, I think there's a study by IMF which actually talked about how this demographic, younger demography in the South Asian context would be able to actually is in a position to contribute to 1/3 of the global growth by 2040. And I think that's really a large chunk that we are discussing here. Uh, and these are the two main premises. But my third premise on which I'm going to argue for India, for South Asia and EU, greater engagement is on the basis of the fact that South Asia has understood the difficulties of having its economy being very, very dependent on a particular Asian dragon. And of course, the pun is intended here. And despite the fact that China is India's largest trade partner and also with many of the other South Asian countries, uh, there is at this point of time a sense of introspection that's taking about the growing unbridled presence it has. And we know about the Sri Lankan experience, there are other experiences too, while certainly Bangladesh and India and Nepal has managed the relationship very well. But again, we've seen how Pakistan and Sri Lanka are certainly struggling with it. I, on basis of this, let me come back to how I see the EU's presence in South Asia. And I think that's what the main essence of today's meeting was. And I'm really glad to be listening to all of you. We've seen that EU has at a bilateral level has very good relationship with all the states, and also at a larger multilateral level, which is with the SARC, and many of those issues have been flagged just now. But for me, the way I see it, EU's presence has, of course, been in an economic cooperative format, but somehow the political presence has never been very well defined. And I think, given the fact of how I see the economies unfolding, this is probably a good time for it to recalibrate how South Asia and EU can actually reorganize the relationship a little bit. And, if you see in the post-COVID phase, we of course something that's been highlighted in terms of how each of the countries, whether in terms of the huge remittance, which is not, it's going to be stalled right now, in terms of how the tourism industry, which is so core to many of us, is again stalled for a while. And of course, there's several other fiscal and monetary issues that all of us are grappling with. So it is at this point of time that South Asian and EU, I think, and also we have understood that in South Asia, many of our economies have grown through investment in infrastructure, agriculture, manufacturing. This is certainly going to slow down. And I would actually urge to see areas in, how we can able to grapple with these black spots that I find is going to become blacker by the time. I think there are very, very severe consequences of COVID, which is going to occur in all of our country, all of our states in the region. And I think we need to examine how that we be able to, with cooperation of others, able to recalibrate and, shall I say, face the challenges to whatever extent. There is, of course, as I mentioned, the domestic and the external debt, which is going to be very high, given the fact of the way the economies are going to be very, very deeply affected. For long, we've seen that EU has had economic cooperation forms of assistance, and that is something that I think South Asia would want to engage with far more closely. There is a lot of work which has gone on in the past, but I think some needs to be understood and actually redefined. And also, I think we need to discover the niche area and see exactly what is hurting us most, how EU can come in there. And I think one of the core areas which has been always the expertise of EU has been historically its technical expertise and its development assistance. And again, I think that what Ambassador Jan mentioned, that there is some, they will also in the months to come be able to figure out what is the level and what is the extent that can be done. But I think in terms of now developing, renewable energy projects, we'll have to also re-examine how smart cities need to be developed in the South Asia region. I think the lessons from COVID is very clear. We really need to re-examine our livelihood programs here and also re-examine the way this very crazy urbanization has taken place, mainly in cities like India and Bangladesh and also Pakistan. I think that is where EU's technical assistance comes in very handy, because this is something that they've been able to do excellently well. And I think we would really gain and, seek EU's also, as I mentioned, the technology transfer. That's something that, again, we've seen how many countries, as the Western, the extra regional powers have held South Asia almost to a hostage, I would say. And that's something which is going to be increasingly relevant to India and other South Asian neighborhood. But my core argument here is that though I think EU and South Asia need to really recalibrate and redefine the strategic partnership. I'm also aware of the fact that this whole area of strategy and political relations is very clubbed in South Asia. There's too much going on there. But at the same time, I think there is space here. I mean, I would certainly think there's space here for EU to be brought in a far more defined manner. And, I think the whole region is a little upset about the way the US and the China trade wars have happened, how both of them have disregarded multilateral dialogue, their protectionist trade policies, all of this, and including the climate change issues, all of this has a very deep impact on every single country in South Asia. And I think this is where we need to kind of refocus and find the core and niche area with the EU. Also, the other aspect, and I think there was a slight mention of that, about the connectivity projects, which again EU has part of in terms of the larger framework. India, of course, will be here to stay. There are issues that many of us are grappling with. Some are from the point of some international funds and monetary fiscal issues, but these are some things that we have to deal with. But India has embarked on its own connectivity corridor in the region, as well as in the third-party countries like the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor. And this is again something that we are doing in collaboration with other powers. And I really strongly believe that this is somewhere where you can come in very strongly. I'm aware that the EU strategy has something of a broader framework, which is called about connecting Europe and Asia. And here I would actually say if it's possible to have interoperable transport systems and digital networks, which is something that again the region is certainly in need of. India, of course, cannot match with China's financial muscle in terms of any of the connectivity projects. So again, one would see a collaborative framework coming about here. And I think, as I mentioned, while the extra regional powers here, EU support here would be very, very required and needed. There is also, when I'm talking about the geostrategy, there's also the point of the Western Indian Ocean, where again, we've seen how, EU has a certain interest, and where India also, the Indian Ocean and the Rim Islands has been able to kind of play a little leadership undertone there. But again, maritime security, again, coming back to the Indian Ocean region, is something which is where EU also is a actor in that global trade, and it would want to keep the sea lines of communication open. So here again, I think both India and EU, certainly on a strategic base, have very many reasons to work together. Also, while Indian Ocean, we know that India and EU have been working closely, and there has been that Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, where EU's blue growth strategy and India's blue economic plan, and there's been kind of convergence. I'm also aware of the fact that while there are many such broad frameworks available, there is very little to show for in terms of actual implementation. And I think last there was a 2016 forum when there was many of these large issues were discussed. But I think we right now need to hone down some of the niche core areas and actually understand where each of other can in the next 6 months. I mean, have an immediate broad framework in the next 6 months to 1 year and a longer framework, and find out areas. And I think managing public health and optimizing our available resources is a imperative need of the day. We just cannot ignore that. We just have to take that. And I think there are many lessons to be learned from this pandemic that has happened globally, as well as the way EU has been able to, in the past or even now, been able to manage and overcome some of it. And I think these are, good practices that we need to learn. And we've seen again over the years how EU has supported a very rule-based order in the South Asian context in terms of their trade policies. And I think that's something benefited us. Democratic norms and things are something that in South Asia we really need to strengthen. And these are, I think, together working to safeguard and preserve multilateralism, and also work together towards developing I think deeper global commons through these multilateral platforms is something that we both sides value, and I think that's something that we need to work on together. The other aspect, and not necessarily just for COVID, I would actually say the refugee crisis in South Asia, which is very severe, very deep. We've seen a lot of our countries grappling with in domestic, in the internal displacement population, as well as cross-border refugee crisis. And this is again something that we need to learn from Europe. They've also been grappling with a lot of crises, but again, there is a lot to learn in terms of exchanging and collaborating and seeing how we can take this forward. Let me, close in by two main broad points I have in terms of EU and SARC. SARC, I think, I think Ambassador Sresha just mentioned that, there are several issues that we are discussing, and if, of course, political differences has not allowed SARC to grow and develop the way it is. But at the same time, and I'm part of this process that we are doing, there are two particular, individual processes that I'm part of, and I'm going to flag them and close my points just now. One is about developing regional value chains. This is something that we need to learn from EU, their experience as to how, unfortunately, that while we constantly discuss the fact that we need to disengage from China, it is very, very difficult right now to start manufacturing everything on our own. The global value chains is a very, very, close different ballgame that's happened, and it's affected us deeply. And I think pandemic has shown us the way that we need to develop a regional value chain, just the way EU has done very, very effectively. And this is not something, and I think, well, EU has been supportive and supporting many of the programs at the SARC level. This is something I would right now say that we are ready to, take off, because all of us in the region understand that despite the political differences, the youth is now looking forward to the well-being of, the economics and the stability. And this is not possible if we don't develop our own regional value chain. And I think EU's wealth of technical expertise and knowledge comes in very handy. I'm going to close with my last one point that I'm developing. And again, that's a huge experience and learning from the EU experiences. But I'm developing a cross-border community in South Asia, where I'm basically focusing on India, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and Indo-Myanmar borders. This is again something that EU has, taken it to a different level completely, while we are certainly not at that level at this point of time. But at the same time, there's a project that I'm working on right now. And I certainly feel that, while most of us are focusing constantly on the urban and the metros, we need to go beyond, because a lot of our human population actually our vast resources lie in the hinterland. But this is true for all the countries in South Asia. And I think if you don't develop a cross-border communities, develop them in the way that there is so much of ethnic overlap, knowledge overlap, systemic overlaps. And this is, again, I think where EU can come in very, very handy for us. And I would actually, think that we could probably kind of zero down in in the short term of the issues that we could discuss together, work and learn from each other, and get the assistance to EU, because I think South Asia right now really needs in many, many areas, and there's large scope for EU to come in, not only politically and strategically, but also through other ways. And of course, a long term. And I know I've spent some time with GIGA in Germany, and I've often been hearing that how India often agrees to a lot of things, South Asia agrees to a lot of things, but when it comes to implementation, we lag behind. I do understand the very severe problem with us, but I hope the pandemic has taught us that there's certain issues we can't leave to the back burner anymore. And I hope EU's experience will teach us to do better. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for like focusing on why it is important to reimagine and recalibrate the whole dimensions of EU-South Asia relationship in terms of like, economic development partnership and strategic level. And in order to promote the common interest, I think that is really worthy to listen. So now I'd like to request Paulo sir to make a presentations.
Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. It was really a very good thought of the Asian Institute of Diplomacy and International Affairs to challenge us to cooperate and to make such a discussion. I am very grateful to you. I think this is a very good initiative. And we did have a very good contributions so far. I would like to thank very much Ambassador Mohan Shastra as well as Dr. Sriyada Datta for their very keen and timely remarks. And of course, to Ambassador Jan de Boete, we are very honored to have you here. And Ambassador Jan de Boete, he really presented in a very complete and thorough way what has been the European Union stance and evolution on the issue. And he really made very clear the whole of the issue, and he ended his remarks, and I would like to really get my own remarks with his last remark on the need for SARC to have a specific and clear point, negotiated point, when it will come to the European Union for negotiations on the future of how should we cooperate to face the sanitary challenges like this pandemic. I think that perhaps one of the main lessons of the European Union creation was exactly what Jean Monnet used to call the policy of doing small and concrete steps. And from this point of view, I think SARC did emerge from years of lethargy exactly with the virus. There was a summit promoted by Prime Minister Modi that managed to keep people, every country on board, and that managed to get an initial response, medical response to the challenge. And I think this is very positive. And I think this is exactly what has to be continued in a second phase, which is going to be how can we now reconstruct our economy? How can we give again trust? How can we build our future together? Well, secondly, I would like to, regarding the remarks of Ambassador Shestra, I would like to say that, well, there is an agreement already in the international community, mostly reached through a proposal that was made by European countries for an inquiry on the whole of this issue, to try to make all things clearer and to try to go over many of the doubts that you just presented. I think it is absolutely essential. I think that we must find again trust in international in the international architecture, because the future has to be built on a multilateral basis. It cannot be done on nobody specific points of view. It has to be done on a multilateral basis, but it must be a trustworthy basis where these questions should not be arising. And my second remark on following this one regarding the international architecture of cooperation is exactly towards the position of the health authorities of India that was exactly simultaneous with this now fully discredited so-called study that was published in Lancet regarding the most well-known medicine that has been around for 70 years and has been used for millions of people, hydrochloroquine. And the very same day that this study that is now quite clearly a fraud was launched, the Indian authorities said that this substance should be used prophylactically. And unfortunately, the international press did not give much cover to this position of the Indian health authorities. But the reality is that some weeks after, we are coming to the fact that the Indian authorities were right on their decision, and they have been acting carefully. They have been acting on the basis of real science and not of shaky publicity. And I think this is a very positive note that we should be aware of. We should congratulate. I would like to give my full congratulations to the health authorities of India to have had the courage to do the right thing at the right moment. And I would like to see this example to fructify and people all over the world to come to terms with this reality. And so what do I think? I think that, you know, we have to find back our trust in the international system. And one of the main elements of this trust is that for decades, you know, it was very obviously very consensual that we need to have a global sanitary requirements applied all over the world. That this sanitation is actually the number one tool to face all these sorts of contagious epidemics. As we know, it's now standard all over the world. You know, the first thing you have to do, well, wash your hands. You know, it's really very basic, but sometimes it's not so obvious to do. And this was exactly the spirit of Prime Minister Modi when just after he assumed power, you know, he made this National Day speech that was that really was a landmark, because the main issue he addressed was the issue of toilets, and this would be considered to be inconvenient. But no, he was absolutely right. That was absolutely the thing to be done. And I think this spirit and this landmark, this frankness should persist. And this should be the number one measure, I think, that we should agree on. And the European Union should see, together with SARC, that to make such an effort all over the world and to help those countries that need really to make a very important step forward in terms of sanitation should be supported. And this is not really a favor that ones are making to the others. No, it is a common interest, because the day you know, pandemics are spreading, they will. It's nearly impossible to prevent them to affect everyone. So it is on everyone's interest to cooperate on such a program. I think that the basis of this program has actually to be sanitation. There is no doubt about that. And the European Union capacity to understand that it should now make a big effort internally to respond to the crisis should also be coupled with a step to the world. Makes such a step for this big challenge to be answered. And of course, I would say that education, basic education, goes hand in hand with sanitation. You know, people have to know the basics of education. And so this is the second thing where I think there should be a very strong consensus, and the European Union should not spare any efforts, and SARC either. Actually, one of the things that from the start of the launching of Sadf that struck me very, very much, you know, we made some field work, inquiry field work in Nepal and Bangladesh. One of these things was that people are aware that education is the key. Actually, education was elected the key factor for progress by, you know, random inquiries that we that we did both in Bangladesh and in Nepal. No, more than any other thing, you know, sometimes people would say, well, you know, people in South Asia are only thinking in religious terms or in any other specific term. No, it's not true. No, people are conscious that education is the key. And so if people are conscious, now we just have to take this, you know, take this attention of the people and to couple it with concrete proposals and to make it really the most important issues that are in front of us. And of course, well, we have things of much more complex things in front of us. But I think that if we would stick and we would start by answering to these specific issues, we would go very, very far. This would strengthen a lot our common resolve to face all challenges. This would create trust in the international community that is now lacking very much. And as my initial remarks, I would stay here and I will be glad to participate in the debate and to answer to all the questions that will be raised. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paulo, sir, for raising some of the practical and then issues in the public domain, really, which we need to address. So we have some questions here in our chat box. Maybe you can also see, look at our chat box, but at the same time, I'll also edit it out, okay? So there is one questions from Thomas from SADF. We want to ask that why there is only like, cooperation is limited within the financial aid, not extended beyond that. Maybe like most of our panelists has like already, agreed that EU and Southeast Asia relationship is not only limited to the financial aid and stuff, but there are, we have very multifaceted relationship, be it in economy, be it in like strategic partnership, but maybe you can add something to it. And there is another question from the Siegfried Wolf, Director of Research, South Asian Democratic Forum. I'd like to read it out. Maybe you can also see it in your chat box. By observing the ongoing Chinese intrusion into Indian territory, the latest PLA exercise in Tibet to train attacks behind enemy lines, its military actions in South China Sea, like the sinking of the Vietnamese vessels, it becomes clear that the addressing of the social and economic impact of coronavirus pandemic is not the top priority of the Chinese leadership. Instead, it is obvious that it will exploit the situation to push its national, especially territorial interest against the neighbors and to continue building up the international posture. So how can EU and South Asia could address this challenge together? So we have only two questions until now. maybe like we can have a very brief response to two of these questions. Can I start from Ambassador Jayan?
Thank you. Thank you. That's quite sure that there is a bigger potential in the EU, South Asia and EU SAARC cooperation. It should not be limited to financial issues, but as I earlier said in my remarks, the priorities include regional stability, poverty alleviation, human rights, sustainable development, good governance and labor rights. So that is already quite extensive. And yes, the potential is definitely there. But to be frank, I arrived in India when I was posted there in September 2007. And at that stage, I was told that the trade and investment agreement between the EU and India, there were just a few small items still lacking, and then it could be signed. And we were already thinking about the date of the signature when there would be the summit between the EU and India. We are in 2020, and the trade agreement is not there yet. And there are still a few minor remarks to be settled. So it is true, the potential is bigger, and I would avoid to blame anyone. It is always a question of trying to come to an agreement, and with blaming, you get nowhere. So both the EU and India in this case, but SAARC in totality also, can do better. And it is in our common interests to do better because we have the same values. We're all in favor of democracy. We're all in favor of socially corrected free market. We're all in favor of human rights. We're all in favor of a number of issues, and in particular, we are in favor of multilateralism. So why don't we apply it first in our foreign policy and definitely in our regional policy, which is not foreign policy anymore because there you are implied yourself. So it is national policy within a regional framework. What we have been doing within the EU for more than 60 years now can be done in other places as well, but it takes small and concrete steps, but also a vision of what can we achieve. And this is something that is definitely lacking at this moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. I guess there is also another question posed to you. I'll read it out. How severely could a possible second wave of COVID, as mentioned by you, affect EU-South Asia economic relations bilaterally or multilaterally, especially trade prospect? The question is from Desika, research assistant of Aidia.
I don't have a crystal ball, of course, and I don't know how and when a possible second wave would occur. But we have lessons learned already. We know that a lockdown is important, but one should be careful not to extend it for too long a time, and things like that we have learned. We know that the trio of measures is the first thing to do. Indeed, as Paolo said, sanitation, but then you have to do quarantine if necessary, testing, and develop a vaccine if possible. The vaccine and made it available over the world. That's why this fund, these pledges of almost 10 billion euros are so important, that it can be made available universally, because otherwise it will not work. How will it affect EU SARC trade relations, well, if there is a lockdown, there is no consumption or very little consumption, trade will be stopped, production will stop, and consumption will be stopped. And that will definitely be for some of the companies in Europe, and I'm afraid in South Asia as well, it will be the final straw that will escape them.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Mohan, sir, do you like to respond very quickly? Mohan, sir? I think our colleague, okay, fine.
What is the question? I mean, is there a particular question?
No, not any particular questions posed to you, but like you can add something like why EU and South Asia cooperations could not go beyond the financial aid.
No, I told you already. The problem lies in our region, not with EU, because EU is composed of 27 countries, and I have visited almost half of all the EU countries while I was in Paris. Normally, people in EU region, they have a good affection for our people around this area, and it's very unpalatable to note that our regions are, despite a very rich culture, proud history, and that abundant natural resources, but and a huge reservoir of talents, SARC has not developed as it should be. That is very bad. For Nepal also, I think for Nepalese people also, SARC has aroused a lot of expectations in the beginning, because our former late king also played a very big role, very good role in the SARC activities. But lately, as I've said, SARC is not gaining any momentum, and there is another factor coming, BIMSTEC. There are 4 members of BIMSTEC from SARC countries. So there is some political maneuverings are going on against one country by another country. But what we feel in our country that we are connected by landmass, our neighbors and little distant neighbors. We cannot change neighbors, but we have to love and have affection among all these member countries. And when there are problems, now we are having some problem with India. And talks is the only medium, how we can solve the problem. So this is what we feel. I personally also feel that between friends, and between family members, in the society, in the country, talks, amicable talks is the only solution. We have solution of problems. And I think when SARC is capable of doing good business with EU and with the rest, other member countries of EU, it holds a great promise for us. Nepal is a small country in terms of economy, but there are many other countries also who can benefit from the this kindness of EU as a whole. But we also are hoping that the days will be brightened, days will come when we can do better relations within SARC region as well as with EU region also. Here, EU ambassador, Madam Ambassador Kodi is a good friend of mine, and sometimes we talk a lot of things, activities about EU countries. So EU is active both with the bilateral basis and the multilateral basis with SARC. And on the bilateral also, we are here, they are doing a lot of activities, helping our people in the villages. So EU has a good reputation here. They are doing a lot of activities. And last time I visited their office, they gave me some papers and I read it. There's a lot of for the empowerment of women, for gender equality. These are issues undertaken by EU office here, and it is very good. so they can develop the status of women here, and also those are the things. Gender equality has become a very big issue in our country. So these things, I hope, personally, I hope in the coming days things will change. Now this pandemic, first we have to end this pandemic. Thereafter, it will bring a bright future for us also, because those old things which have been crossed now, we have to remake again. Mankind, humans are resilient. They, even now we have problem, but problems will not persist all the time. It will evaporate in some days, and again now we have a better chance to make new things and develop our economy, develop our society.
Mhm.
And in these things, union like European Union, they should always they are giving a helping hand to us, and we must be thankful to them. As Ambassador John has said, you have a high, big amount of funds to finance activities in around the world, and so that is a very
Okay.
big promise for us also. And I personally
Mhm.
hope this will be better
Mhm.
in future. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your response. Now, I'd like to request Sri Radha ma'am for a response. This question, yeah. Very, very briefly, if you can.
Very briefly, I don't agree that EU and South Asia cooperation is only confined to financial aid. I think there are very many value-based, norm-based ideas that all the countries are working together. Of course, there's lots of bilateral progression going on, and that's how most of the countries work with the EU at a bilateral level, apart from the fact that I mentioned they're huge trade partners. But a lot of these issues which has just been flagged, I think there are several sectors that we work very closely on. And I think right now, as I said, the pandemic has taught us, has shown us the severe gaps in many of our systems in South Asia. And I think that's exactly where EU's assistance or in support in terms of developing those platforms would be very important. I think public health, education sector, and those are, and of course, as I said, regional value chain, something with the expertise that, US has. I think something that we could work on very closely. And I think there's a point that uh, Dr. Wolf has mentioned about how EU and South Asia could address the challenge which is that we are facing with vis-a-vis China. As I said that in the very beginning, I think there's a need to recalibrate. One of the last instance I really remember EU being active politically in South Asia was during 2006, 2007 in Bangladesh. That was that interregnum period when there was that caretaker government led. That was the only time I saw the EU was very, very, politically active and wanting to bring a change because it was the situation on the ground was so drastic. But that apart, in the last one decade or plus, I haven't seen EU very strongly come in politically. I think this is a space, and I think there's a space for all of us in South Asia, and especially in India, that we need to have more powers. Of course, Quad and other by extra-regional players are there, and I know it's crowded, but at the same time, I think EU's partnership, which brings a lot more value-based ideas to the table, is very different, where there's a very sheer power jostling when it comes to India's relation with the other powers. This is not so for EU, and I think that's all the more reason why EU and South Asia especially should be cooperating. And I think while all the points about SARC and everything is there, but at the same time, there are certain, some trade-based issues which are still carry on. I mean, the connectivity issues which are still work in progress. It's true SARC could have worked far more effectively, but I think there are huge political differences. Until we sort that out, it's not possible. But at the same time, there's certain things on the ground, and there are trade organization bodies who are very effectively working. It's slow, and I completely agree to the point I think Ambassador Yan made that, and I said this myself that in my time spent at Giga, I saw that while there were dialogues and other mechanisms in place between EU and India, much of the implementation never took place. It was all there, written up, but nobody ever took it forward. And I do agree that for India, EU has not seen priority. They've always been struggling with trying to make friends with either US or China, or so EU has not been priority. But as I'm saying, I think there'll be recalibration, and we have to reinvest ourselves in different powers and different friends that we now think we should be developing. I can only speak for myself. Emmy, of course, has a different consideration and different issues. But I'm aware of the fact that while a broad framework exists, there hasn't much that has taken place on the ground. And sincerely hope, at least on some basic core issues of public health, education, some of which, as I said in my community border project, it's all part of that, is something that we should be able to take forward in the days to come. Incremental steps where we should be able to see a beginning somewhere.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Now I'd like to request Paulo, sir. Before that, there is also one specific questions to you. As you indicated that education and health should be the focus of support, what can be the opportunities for online education between University of Europe and South Asia? I think me myself, like being graduate from the Europe, I think the education cooperation between South Asia and Europe, I mean, like there are ample of opportunity to strengthen the lessons by education cooperation. So, Paulo, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I think that really we already made some of the most important points. I would like to say that to thank, well, in the first place, to Professor Tomás Dentinho, to Dr. Siegfried Wolf, and to Jessica Lapata, associated with us for putting all these important questions to our panel. And I would like to say that Ambassador Jan de Boet, he really stressed the most important point, these long-standing negotiations, never-ending story of an agreement between the European Union and India. This would really be very much welcome if there would be positive development. I think this would help in a lot of dimensions. I think that we have to understand what are the points that are blocking and how to unknot these problems. I have some ideas on this. I think that even some of the issues have to do with the health policies, and I think that this pandemic and these responses might actually highlight and make some clarification on the points that have to be sorted out. But I think that he really made the most important points from the point of view of what would be the most welcome development in the near future. Well, secondly, I would also like to say that the spirit of Ambassador Mohan Shestra is exactly the spirit that can lead us to a new approach, a dialogue. It was really, as Dr. Siegfried Wolf is pointing out, this was really unfortunate that just in the aftermath of the sanitary crisis, we had this standoff by the Chinese military forces in the Ladakh border with India. We really think it's not very helpful for what we need for a constructive future. And I think that Ambassador Shrestha is absolutely right on the need to strengthen the dialogue as the key to get over all the issues that we are facing. Dr. Datta, she said something that really is the key to answer the specific issue raised by Professor Dentinho, and he mentioned my name in particular. The issue is not financial. I mean, when we think about the European Union-South Asia relations, we should never start by the financial angle. She is absolutely right. And if we would choose some angle, I think that the angle raised by Professor Dentinho is exactly the needed one. That is, we need, I think, the more I know about South Asia, the more I think it's very similar with the European Union. Very much more than people think, especially in the attitudes. Of course, levels of development and levels of material wealth might be very different, they might, but the spirit and the way the mechanisms, the social mechanisms, are much more similar than one could think. And so what we really need is dialogue. And, Erasmus Mundi has been in the past the most important program of the European Union to develop university cooperation between South Asia and the European Union. And by the way, SADF has been a partner of some of these programs, one of them on the Erasmus, directly on the Erasmus angle, the other one on the Agenda 2020, more on global scientific issues, but also relates with cooperation with universities. It's with India, global India. And I think this is really the key factor, because we need to know each other much better. And the way to do it is exactly to allowing the dialogue to be done. We are now, doing this webinar. Now it's becoming a bit the norm. We know why, but I do not think it would be a good idea to stay there forever. I think that we really need to socialize. It's fundamental. We need to know, face to face our South Asian counterparts in Europe and vice versa, Europeans in South Asia. We need that because we need to understand how common it is, our heritage, our challenges, our objectives, our way of looking at life. And this needs something more than what these electronic means can give us. And so I would really make a strong appeal, answering a bit the challenge raised by Professor Coutinho, that please do not curtail relations between European Union and South Asia, the travel, but quite on the contrary, do more than you did in the past. This has been, I used to say when I was in the European Parliament that Erasmus was the most successful European program ever. Erasmus, because it managed to get, youngsters coming from distant, lost places, regions in the corners of Europe to other parts of Europe. And this changed completely the mindset of Europe. And that's a bit what we need to do between South Asia and the European Union. We need a lot more connection, a lot more knowledge. And starting it by the youth on our education system through the universities is really the idea. We should do more. Erasmus Mundi has been very good, but expand it, not to limit it to just video sort of encounters. This is perhaps the biggest challenge we have in front of us. Thank you.
So thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Now I think we are at the end of this virtual conversations. Finally, I'd like to request each of you to make your closing statement in 1 to 2 minutes, if you can. That would be really helpful for us. So can I start from Ambassador Jan?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that indeed what Paulo just said, we need to know each other better. And we need to do this more frequently. The electronic means are there. We need to use them better and more heavily, more intensely. But the first thing to do is to know that we have common interests. People are in common values. And as long as we know that these values as human beings are the same in South Asia and in the member states of the EU and in the EU, and we take the European Economic Area and United Kingdom with it, of course. It is not because Brexit happened that the UK doesn't have the same values anymore, and the people of the UK. Let's be very open and very frank about that. But that is the first thing to do. And then the second one is we have to take the organizations seriously. I remember vividly that I had a number of discussions with my colleagues in many ministries within the countries I was accredited to. And I was flabbergasted to hear that they said, well, the EU, we don't know what it is really. We prefer to talk directly with United Kingdom at that stage, former colonial power. We prefer to talk directly with Germany. We prefer to talk directly with France, etc. Which meant that as a representative of Belgium, they did not prefer to talk to me. That's what they were saying. And whereas when we talk as European Union, we have a common interest, and if the countries of South Asia talk as SARC, you have a common interest, and together we have a real weight in the world. You know, SARC, the population of that group, and the population of Europe, and I mean not just population, but also the influence, thanks to the economic weight and other factors that are playing, because then together we can influence maybe for a large part the world. And the world does not depend just on superpowers or hyperpowers. The world depends on human beings like we are doing it today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Now I'd like to request Ambassador Monsor for your brief remarks.
Thank you, Shamji, once again. I reiterate my point, few points. Like regarding the pandemic, we must combat very well, conquer, and then we have to recoup all losses we have. It has done to our humanity. And on EU-SARC relations, when SARC countries will be able to realize the opportunities, the cooperation to be offered by EU, it will be really a big stimulus to our region, that I firmly believe. For this region, I again say as my main point that dialogues between varying parties is the only solution of the problem. There is a saying, there is no lock made without a key. Similarly, I hold the view that there is no problem without a solution. Like, just to give an example, America and Vietnam for 30 long years, finally in 1972, when they had a dialogue, diplomatic dialogue in Paris, the problem was solved, the war ended. Now they are the biggest trading partners. So this is the peace dividend normally brought by the negotiations and talks and dialogues. So I'm very hopeful. Time will change. No country can remain intransigent forever, and the leaders will realize that we are really missing a very good bandwagon, and sanity will prevail in future. And we can. I'm an optimistic man, and I say like this, despite knowing that there are so many problems. But still, I hold a view for future that our region is a very good region. People are very nice. We have very nice culture, history, geography, everything very good. Only thing that we lack sanity among the leaders. It will come someday. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Now I'd like to request Sridhar ma'am for your final take.
Very briefly, I think I'll just suggest that, while the government and foreign ministries have their own imperatives and their own rationale to go ahead and not to, do other things, but I think some of us working at the think tanks at the, at the track two level, we can only push our ideas to extent. We can, hone them to the point that we can. And I hope, and I think we've seen in many of these track tours that I've been part of all my years, that somewhere along the way, the ministry or the government does take into cognition those things. So I think at this level, if we can kind of, put it together, ideas and thoughts, I'm sure, as all of us agree, that there is only that much more betterment that is going to happen in a cooperative framework. And I think discussions, dialogue, there is never end to that. And I think we all learn from each other. And I think that's the main, platform that I'm basing myself on. And I think at my level, I'll be more than happy to take this forward. As I was saying, once my book is out on the, I'm looking at basically the northeast of India, but where I'm again looking at the border issues that India has with the neighbors. And how we can, take that forward, how we can make the hinterland a part of the main cities in all of, say, South Asia. I think, as I said, these are some learnings that we can do in a big way from EU. Their practices, their best practices, and I think let's begin at our level, and we hope and we can only wish that the foreign ministries and the governments can take it forward from there. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Before moving to the Paulo sir, I like to express my sincere gratitude to Mohan sir, Ambassador Jan, and Dr. Sridhar ma'am for your valuable interventions and participations. I think this is really very interactive and worthy to listen and in order to promote these relations between South Asia and EU. And I'd also like to express my sincere gratitude to Paulo sir and SADF for collaborating with us for jointly hosting this webinar. And we're also looking forward to the similar kind of cooperation in the future. So over to you, Paulo sir.
Thank you very much. From my side, I would like to thank the Asian Institute of Diplomacy and International Affairs for this cooperation. I think it was very successful. I would like to give my warm, sincere identification of points of view with my colleague speakers, both ambassadors, Jan de Boet and Mohan Shrestha, and also with Dr. Datta. I think that you made wonderful points. From my side, I would like to say that I think we came to the point where we have to see that fear is our biggest obstacle. Of course, we should not be temerary. We should not ignore dangers. We should not look the other way around, but we should not get obsessed either. I mean, it's as Ambassador Jan de Boet said already, I mean, in the long run, we all know what is going to happen. There is no alternative to this. But there is an alternative to what might happen with humanity, what might happen with the new generations, and we must be working on it. And we should not prevent that fear will hinder us to take the attitudes that we have to take. We must act. We must be proactive, going to the others, not be afraid of the others, and thinking that we are all citizens of the same planet, and we have to work together to understand each other, to make a better future, if not that much for somebody like me, but at the very least to the younger generations. And thank you all, and let's hope that we will be seeing this in the past tense as soon as possible, and we will look at our opportunities for cooperation in the full year. That's my very, very deep feeling right now. Thank you all, and looking forward to a next occasion. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.